right, welcome back to Got It, the filmmaking podcast that's got your back. My name is Emilio Miguel Torres.
I'm Toby Romero.
And I'm Maggie Berry.
Welcome back, y'all. We have a very special guest this week, and so I'm very excited to introduce them. But before we get into our guest this week, I just want to say we're trying a slightly different format of recording this episode, so bear with us as we navigate new technological changes. And also, this episode, last week's episode got delayed a little bit because we were dealing with some moving stuff, but hopefully we'll get back on a regular schedule very soon. All right. Our guest this week is a friend, a collaborator, someone who's really awesome and I admire, who goes to NYU with Toby and I, and went/goes. And that person is Alexandria Hellman. Everyone give.
Woo!
Hi. Hi.
Hi, Alexandria. Would you like to call us
Hi.
Alexandria or Alex on this show? Or
You can call me
Alexa?
Alex.
Alex. All right,
Oh.
cool.
Yeah, Alex.
So yeah, Alex, for those who don't know, is a fellow filmmaker, director in her own right, writer, all kind of editor as well. But most recently, she was the producer and editor for a short film that Toby and I did this year called The Ladder. So yeah, we just have a couple topics, and we thought this week would be a good thing since last week we talked about acting, and the week before that we talked about crewing in general and productions. So we thought this week would be a good topic, a good week to talk about producing, because that's a very interesting topic. So Maggie, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. Alex, I only got interested in filmmaking when I met Emilio. I had no idea what a producer even was. I just knew that there was a producer in the credits, but that meant absolutely nothing to me. So could you just define what a producer does and what that could look like for you?
Yeah, so a producer, well, just a producer, because there's multiple different kinds of producers, but a flat out producer is usually involved in normally all three stages of production. Three is the most commonly known, but it's actually 5 stages. So past pre-production, production, post-production, before pre-production is development, and after post-production is distribution. Of course, when it came to the latter, I got added on during pre-production, but there are some projects where producers usually start in development, working with a writer and sometimes a director if they're on board yet, and sort of developing the story and making sure that it's feasible. They have investors to even start pre-production. But basically, the producer is sort of like a guide and keeps everyone in check, make sure everything's going well. They're sort of like an overseer, but they also do a lot of work and step into areas where people may lack or help people. But yeah, they keep everything organized and afloat.
That's very cool. Alex, do you want to tell us a little bit about your type of experience and the different roles of producing that you've done in the past and why you enjoy it?
Yeah. So I've been interested in film ever since I was 7. The classic story, my mom got me a camcorder for my birthday, not a doll. And I just started recording myself and editing on Movie Magic camera, whatever that was called. And so I've always been interested in that. And I guess throughout high school, I basically produced all the little things that I made, like finding locations and finding the actors at my school who wanted to be a part of that. I think my biggest experience, again, my own project, but in junior year of high school, I, for some reason, didn't get into the show choir that I wanted to. So I decided to make an hour-long movie. And I had to pretty much start from development all the way to, I'd say distribution, but not really, because at 16, I had no idea what film festivals were. I just was making movies for the fun of it. But basically, I was casting, location scouting, I was scheduling, basically doing things like a line producer. So really the bulk of what I was doing producing wise, I really didn't know it was called producing back then, but it started then. And I was never actually interested in producing. The truth is, I didn't really know it, or I didn't know what I was doing. But then I got to NYU and I was like, I'm only here for directing. That's it. And then obviously I learned about producing and I found that to be really interesting. Forgetting your question, my experience. Okay, so I basically work more so as a development producer, help people with their ideas, mainly because I'm also consider myself slightly a writer. So I just like helping other writers. And normally at NYU, for a lot of film students, uh, most of the writers are directors. So it's just sort of keeping their head on and making sure that they can attain what they want with a small budget, because we are pretty limited sometimes at NYU or just in film school in general. But just helping other people's projects come to fruition was really interesting to me. Um, and I want to keep doing it. So yeah. Is
Yeah.
that good enough?
No,
Okay.
of course. Yeah, no, no. Well, so one thing I just want to touch on, because I think it's pretty impressive that you just kind of glazed over that you made a feature when you were in high school. So that's pretty cool. I'm curious to know a little more, because like you said, you hadn't really
That's
done.
insane. How did you like? Did you have help? Like, what? How did you do that at 16 years old? Like, I mean, producing a feature or just making a feature in general is like a huge mountain that like takes a
Yeah.
lot of steps and strides.
Yeah, honestly, it took 6 months. I was six, yeah, I said I was 16. And I started in December of 2015. And did I have help? No, I did not have help. I took a bunch of Ubers, and luckily my cast, they were all high schoolers. So like their parents dropped them off, and it was a lot of organization. And I honestly don't really know how it happened, but because, like it's to find 13 people who like are on script too, because there's no script soup. There's nobody to help me out. I'm like, I know the script in my head, so I'm sort of helping. But it was really fun because it was actually like an action. It was an action spy movie. So we had to like choreograph stunts and fights and stuff. And it was really fun. I don't really know how I did it. I just kind of did it. And then, yeah, it took 6 months. And then in May 2017, we screened it at NBC Universal, which was really cool. We screened it there, but I still had no idea what a film festival was. But it just kind of happened, and then that was it. But
That's
yeah,
super awesome. That's insane. That's like a super awesome. I had no idea. That's awesome. How did you like go about? I mean, like learning all this stuff. Like, how did you? I guess you said you were kind of just winging it, but like, were you looking up YouTube videos, or like, how were you like able to execute these things and like know like, oh, I have to put the camera here for this shot and then here for this shot, and like this is how I need to talk to my actors and actresses.
yeah, I was kind of working out of my head. Like, no, I never watched any YouTube videos about that specifically. I watched YouTube videos about like beauty gurus. So nothing in the film area. I don't know. I mean, well, so it was my junior year. So in middle school, I lived in Maryland. And because my mom saw that I was really into film, she moved us out to California. So I was there basically, I'd say in LA, the majority of my high school career in Burbank, where like the studios are. So naturally, every year I took a video production class. I don't know if that quite helped. I mean, I don't know if video production preps you to make a movie, but I'm sure it helped me in some aspect. And it's funny too, because I didn't watch movies back then. Like I wasn't a big fan. I actually hated the concept of it because I was like, I don't want to be influenced by anybody. I want my vision to be my vision, which was weird because now I'm really
You
into
still feel
movies.
so you don't still feel that way?
No. I'm really into movies now. um, yeah, honestly, that is a big question mark in my life, but I don't question it because I'm pretty sure that's what got me into film school. So.
Well, I mean, I think it got you into film school, and also like having the skills of executing on something that big also gave you the skills for what you're working on right now. Which for people who are listening currently, I guess you guys are in post on the pilot. That's correct. Yeah. So
Yeah.
right now, Alex is in post production on a pilot for a web series that she's the showrunner for. So
Mhm.
I want to hear all about this show. It's called In the Making. Let's start from the beginning. When did you decide you wanted to make a web series? How did it happen? That kind of stuff.
Also, what's a
Okay.
showrunner?
Oh, okay. I'll answer Emilio's question first. So I actually never wanted to make this. I was only out the gate. Wait, I feel bad because I feel like some cast are going to hear this. I did want to make this. It was always in my book of ideas, but I never touched on it because I kind of like, again, like my film at 16, I was doing an action spy movie. So like I like high concept ideas and, you know, group of college students, which maybe I should say what the show is about. So In the Making is about 5 best friends all living in New York in college, trying to make it into different industries, different entertainment industries. And one has to exploit the other in order to succeed. So it's like kind of cool, but it's fairly low concept in the way that I just kind of need New York and actors, you know, no like VFX or anything like that. But I decided to make it in the midst of the pandemic because right before the pandemic was starting, I actually was in pre-production for a feature that I was going to make over the summer. And that was like a musical feature film that I had like written the songs for and I worked with a composer on. Okay, well, clearly like we couldn't be stuck in Maryland for 30 days during COVID because we didn't really know what that was back in March when we all got sent home sophomore year. So I just kind of sat and then I just looked in my book of ideas and I had kind of had this concept and I'm like, what's something that could get me out there? What's something simple? And then this kind of bore, which I feel like that's like a bad way of coming upon it. But, you know, I never really wanted to start in TV. But like after, and again, it's different for everybody, but I sort of found really what I wanted to do in going to film school. And I knew that eventually I loved producing so much that I wanted to run eventually a production company. And I think show running, which I'll get into, show running a show is sort of like kind of running a production company in a way when it comes to actually when you start filming all of the episodes and making sure that all the pieces are together and all the department heads are in communication because they're different for every episode. So it's like this whole thing. I hope that didn't offend anybody, but I love the show. But basically, so show running is exactly that. You hire everybody that comes on board. You basically, show running is sort of coupled with the term executive produced or created by. So I have the concept. I oversee maybe the writer's room and where they're taking the episodes, sort of giving my opinion on the trajectory of the season or where it's heading to. I assist with casting. I mean, it's a little different right now because obviously we're students. In the real world, I don't think a showrunner is like that meticulously involved, but I don't know, Shonda Rhimes is pretty involved in her stuff, so it could be the same. Stop me when I'm rambling because I am. But basically, the showrunner is they just oversee everything for the show.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great explanation. So I think we all want to hear more. I'm now also did not know you were involved with the musical, which Maggie, of course, is our musical theater goddess in the room.
Alex, this is insane. Like you say more things and like my jaw drops. Like you could be like, "Oh yeah, I met the president yesterday." And I don't think I'd be shocked.
Exactly. So all right, so let's focus in the making though. So give us, okay, now that we know that kind of how it happened, your concept,
Right.
that you hated the idea. No, I'm just kidding. Give us the timeline of like, all right, so COVID starts, you were gonna do a feature that fell out, then you're like, okay, I'm gonna start developing In the Making. You shot In the Making in like earlier this year, right?
Yes, I shot it in April, early April 2021, and then it trickled into early May because of COVID, actually. So
yeah, walk us through, okay, like the more nitty gritty, like how does one, while they're in the middle of COVID, virtual learning, cast a show, get it all like get it up and running? Like what was the shooting process like? Because shooting a pilot, is it an hour-long pilot or 30-minute pilot?
half an hour, yes.
Yeah, even a half-hour pilot like that, especially with COVID restrictions, takes a long time to shoot. So maybe just walk us through, yeah, like literally step by step how you made it happen.
Okay. So I had the idea of the show, but I didn't actually start writing the script or anything until December of I don't 2020. Yeah, so December. And then in January, I just posted on our fellow Tish crew calls for a producer. And I added two who are now co-producers to the team. And we kind of talked through there. That started in the development stage. Then it came to pre-production. Mind you, when the pandemic happened, I got sent home to Maryland. But when pre-production happened, I decided to move to New York because we had to start location scouting. And this was in February. And we had a plan to shoot the first week of April. That was our plan. So it was kind of tight, but we tried. So we were location scouting. And that had to take a lot of precautions as well, because when you're reaching out to people to location scout, you have to let them know that you're wearing a mask, you're wearing booties, like there's no vaccine at this time, and everyone is really clean, and you can't really go anywhere. Like there's places where we like couldn't really touch anything. Obviously, like our DP, when he was able to join us, was shown, like this is not a soundboard. I don't know anything about the photography world, but like electricity, things like that. Those are probably the only things that we could touch. Other than stuff like that, I mean, pre-production went pretty well. The only thing that held us up was casting. So casting was all virtual, which was fine, but usually there are like chemistry reads and things like that, and there are like relationships in the pilot that you would like to make sure they have in-person chemistry beforehand, but it was a lot of Zoom chemistry reads, and these are supposed to be best friends in junior year, so it was really imperative that they look like best friends or acted like best friends. I mean, eventually went all well. I'm getting war flashbacks. Honestly, forgot a bunch of it, but so also during pre-production, during COVID, you had to get a COVID compliance officer, which sounds like really, really formal, but basically somebody had to take an online course and get a certificate, and that made them a COVID compliance officer.
We had a really do that now, the COVID compliance officer, or is that in the past?
I'm not aware right now. I would assume so because we're still in COVID, but maybe not if your like whole cast and crew is vaccinated. So that's cool. But at the time, no vaccine. So we had a COVID compliance officer named Chris, and basically we would do screenings. We could not be on set, obviously, without a negative COVID test. When we got into set, we could not go into the location without checking in with Chris. And like, he had to ask us screener questions like, are you feeling ill? Do you feel anything like this? And if we passed, we got in. But I really wanted to touch on the complications because this happened to us our first weekend. So we build backstory here, right? These are supposed to be best friends. So we decided to have a photo shoot for these best friends. Like we're casted, we're doing well. We're like, hey guys, 2 days before their first weekend, like let's go to this place and take a couple of pics. So we have it for production design, which is what our production designer wanted anyway, right? So we're there at the photo shoot, and a couple days later, we find out that one of our actors tested positive, which means that people were close contact. So no joke, I'm walking to set, and mind you, at the time I lived on the Upper West Side, and where we shot was in Brooklyn, so it took me an hour to get to set for some reason. So I'm walking at 5 a.m. For call time at 6 a.m. And I hear that Chris says that one of our main actors, the main person, is positive, and that he was close contact with the second main girl. Also during COVID, you have to prep for these instances, and you have to have backups or understudies, they call them. And we did have understudies, so that was great. We just did not have an understudy for the male guy, but we did have an understudy for the main girl. And that whole day, we basically shot all of her scenes that we could. We had this one saving grace backup guy that I never auditioned him because he sent in his audition like 5 days before the first weekend. And I'm like, oh, that's too last minute. Like, we can't do a callback. but we called him literally the first day of production and we're like, hey, can you like come in? Which was really funny. Because I had never worked with him. I never had a callback with him. I literally never even met him over Zoom. But he turned out to be Mr. Matt Haida. And he was an amazing actor and came with all of his lines prepared. And I hope I'm explaining this story correctly because it's like actually crazy.
No, it's
But
insane.
I blocked some parts of it because it was very stressful. But yeah, he came onto set and he knew everything, and I worked really, really well with him because it's just good for a director and an actor to have a good relationship. Um, so on top of, probably should have clarified, but on top of producing the show or being the showrunner, like, right, I wrote it, I directed the first episode. So working with these actors, it was important that I knew how they worked and that I gave them enough backstory, again, because they're supposed to be 3 years deep into their friendship. I'm kind of talking a little bit more about like the directing and complicated complicities of it. Should I dive into the producing of it?
No, I mean, well, first of all, like we definitely believe on this podcast, especially that like you can't be one thing. I mean, we made a whole episode about like the value of crewing in other positions and things like that. I mean, Maggie's an actress as well as a filmmaker. So yeah, no, it's important, I think, in producing for you to also talk about the other things you do because ultimately those make you a better producer, right?
Right.
So, all right, so you shoot in the making over the course of a couple weekends because of COVID, and then you launched a crowdfunding campaign.
Right. We did launch a crowdfunding campaign. We were raising $36,000, which I should mention, like the production of In the Making was way beyond what I ever thought it was going to be. I really wanted it to be like shoestring with a couple of people. Again, during COVID, it's not the best to have so many people on set. Luckily, we were shooting in a bar. I'm 21. We were shooting in a bar that had a capacity of 50 people. And the max that they allowed was 20. But of course, with my high concept ideas in the pilot, I wrote a Halloween party scene, and we had about 40 people on set. So that that was interesting. Oh yeah, right. I was like, why did I mention that? Right. So high concept, right? So again, I wanted it to be shoestring, but it was not. It was borderline almost professional. Like we were going to a rental house and renting out like these 16-foot U-Hauls and doing pickups and drop-offs, which may be normal for some people, but was not normal for me. And there was just like a lot to it. Anyway, so I mentioned that because we did crowdfund $36,000, and that's literally how much
Wow.
the pilot cost to make. Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, what you did, which I think is interesting, is you made the pilot. So then you had footage and behind the scenes photos, all
Yes.
this stuff. And then you crowdfunded to make the pilot after the fact.
Yeah.
So like, obviously somehow you got the funding to make it happen in the moment and then just make sure to pay people and make stuff happen after the fact. So
Exactly.
I think that's for listeners, like something to think about. Like sometimes if you're going to crowdfund for a project, or maybe you need to get funding for a project, if you're in a situation where it's possible, maybe just make it, use your own savings or whatever, and then hope that you can get those costs recouped, because there's definitely people who do that. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of sometimes making pilots. A lot of people make pilots with their own dollar and then just hope that they can sell it to a network. So in that regard, Alex, so obviously you're still working on the pilot, but since the crowdfunding, since you got a little word on the street about your pilot, what is next steps for the pilot? And then tell us what your hopes are for the long-term existence of In the Making.
Sure. So we had garnered some interest from a streaming service, which was cool. But that sort of required a development deal. So I wouldn't retain as much creativity, which most people would be like, who cares? Like, you're getting a check. But see, I'm special. Like, I have a plan, and this is like step one in my plan. And there are some things that I plan for this that I really need to see come to fruition. So for right now, we are currently, the team's back together, part of us, and new members are back together, and we are back in development for the rest of the season. and actually reshooting the pilot, but we are editing it to sort of have part of our pitch proposal of our package for investors in the actual season. And I'm going to independently produce it. And the plan is to hopefully sell a distribution deal rather than development. But if not, releasing on YouTube is cool. John Krasinski did that and then got picked up later. So there's always that possibility.
Or
But
there's
that's
even the
plan as of now.
contemporaries like High Maintenance on HBO was a Vimeo web series that like did like 2 seasons on Vimeo, just fully self-produced, and then got picked up.
Mhm.
And then Ben Sinclair still got to have creative control. So that, I mean, that's totally cool, and there's totally like a blueprint for that process.
Yeah, and Cobra Kai, like on YouTube TV, then getting picked up by Netflix. So, you know, there's infinite amounts of possibilities. Our main goal is just getting the amount of money that we need to make the season, and then just doing it.
Alex, you mentioned talking about independently funding it and, you know, being an indie filmmaker. And for maybe some of the listeners out there that are trying to make a short or a feature and get money from investors and other people, what are kind of some key tips that you would give them and kind of, you know, guide them in the right direction?
Okay. If someone is looking for an investor outside of your network or outside of friends and family, and they are actually an investor, I would recommend getting a legal advisor or a lawyer, because at that point, there could include ROI or points. ROI is the return of investment. So if somebody makes an investment, that you'd give them their money back plus X amount of percent post, either from your gross revenue or immediate revenue, things like that, when you do hit distribution, or if you go to a film festival or you sell it. There's a lot of intricacies and there's a lot of contracts. So that's why I recommend definitely getting some legal advice. There's ROIs and there's also points. Not so much for a short film. I mean, maybe for a short film, I have never really heard of people getting points, or it's like royalties off of a short film or a feature or any type of project that gets extra money or gets revenue past after they recoup all the costs of what it costs to make it. So there are points. You have to figure out how many points, also known as percentage, of the extra profit. Profit is the word I was looking for. Points or percentage off of profit that you're going to give to your investors. So step number 1, get a lawyer.
Yeah. Wow, you're like I can't believe how much you do. This is so cool. You're obviously very good at what you do. So, can you just like go into a little bit of like the traits or anything that like what makes a good producer and what do you have to do to get there and how to start that process?
Definitely. I think the first step is to find material. That's what all of the film teachers told me to do, is find material first and make sure you believe in it and you like it. When it comes to traits, I think being very assertive is very important. I'm pretty introverted, but I'm also assertive at the same time. I don't really know how, but definitely being assertive, because and being sort of confident slightly in your communication skills. There's a lot of negotiating that I had to do when making In the Making, for example. That you just need to be confident going in and talking to someone about X thing to negotiate on. You have to be, I would say, organized. I mean, I would say I'm organized. I shouldn't harp on myself. I'm pretty organized. So definitely staying organized and on count and on top of people, not in an annoying way, but just like checking in, because it's very important to just know where everybody is and make sure everybody's delivering something on time. As probably many of you have heard, time is money. So it's very important that you are keeping on track, and that's where being assertive comes in, because some people don't really like to bother people, but that's just something you have to do, and you have to make sure people are staying on track. I think that would be it.
And then if someone wanted to become a producer and didn't necessarily go to film school, how can they get into that type of field and work the network?
Yeah, of course. I think if you are making your own film, I mean, you're basically producing yourself. So that's a good experience right off the bat. If you know a friend who maybe has an idea for a film or know somebody in your network that is trying to make a film, you can also produce it that way, but like in a more industry way. It would probably be being an assistant to a producer and seeing the ropes and learning the ropes rather from them. Even being a PA on set, honestly, if you can pinpoint who the director is on set, just seeing what they do. I like to say a lot to my own producers that being a producer on set is kind of like being a PA. You're helping everybody when you can. So being a actual PA on set is pretty great experience from there too, and just observing the different department heads and really observing what's going on set because those are things that you need to know as a producer.
Do you think you need a business degree?
I don't. Um, I myself always had a plan B to become a lawyer, so I think some knowledge in legalities is great. And there are like books on that from Amazon, but I do not think you need a business degree at all. As long as you're a good communicator and you hit all the right things and the end product is to make something, right? So going through the steps to make it, and as long as you're okay dealing with the problems that arise, because 9 times out of 10 problems will happen, then anyone can push through it for sure.
Wow, super, super insightful. Maybe we switch gears and talk a little bit about that special project we all worked on. So Alex, I was introduced to you through Emilio when he started on the hunt looking for some help for The Ladder, which for people that don't know is a short film that Emilio directed. Maggie was first assistant director, first AD. Alex produced it and I was the DP. So we all kind of got to know each other through this project. And I was introduced through Alex to Alex through this project as well, which is super cool. So maybe do you want to talk a little bit about The Ladder and the process of producing The Ladder?
Sure. So I had found Emilio's post looking for a line producer. So a line producer differs from an actual producer because a line producer more so is about budgeting and scheduling. Those are the two things. So sort of in the industry, you're working off of Movie Magic budgeting, which is a software, and also Movie Magic scheduling, although some people work off of Google Sheets, which is fine. But mainly it is making sure, mainly making sure that the schedule is on par. It works with the budget, works with location, location restrictions, and then budget, making sure that you're within budget, even better coming under budget. So that's kind of what I signed on to do because I own Movie Magic budgeting and I have not touched it in a while. And I was like, sure, more experience. But then I got bumped up to producer, which is awesome. And I started helping out in more areas. I did help create the schedule. The really biggest thing that Emilio wanted me on board to do was to figure out the insurance. When you go from a shoestring to a semi more professional but still shoestring film, you have to have, or you don't have to, but it's recommended that you have insurance for your equipment, especially if you're not getting equipment from your school, and that in itself has its own insurance. If you're outsourcing insurance from other equipment houses, rental houses, that you have your own insurance. And the thing about The Ladder is that it takes place in Ketchikan, Alaska, and there are some shots that are shot over the water, which is interesting because normally you just needed an equipment rental insurance. But with Emilio's film, we had to get a movie boat policy. So we had to get insurance that covered like hull and machinery, collision and towers, liability, things that would just ensure that, if the camera did fall into the ocean, that, whoever you were renting equipment from, or let's say a C-stand fell into the ocean, that it would be insured. So those were like the biggest things in pre-production for producing Ladder.
Honestly, I don't think we would have needed boat insurance, but Toby was my DP, and so I was like, I better get insurance now because we got this guy holding the camera.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I was so careful with the camera. I had two amazing helpers making sure that I was staying on track, and we made it all happen. There was no collisions, nothing bad happened, thankfully. So you know what? Rest assured.
So
And
okay,
you did rent from a rental house,
yeah.
which most rental houses outside of your school will require that you have insurance.
Yeah, no. So I concur with everything Alex said. Originally, I basically have self-produced all my own projects, and so I've never worked with a producer before. Also, never worked with an editor before, which Alex also was for this project. And originally, I didn't want to get a producer because I was like, this is my hometown. Like, what help is someone who like doesn't know anything about Catch Can going to bring? Like, that's really was my thought. And so originally, I just needed a line producer because I knew we were going to crowdfund for it, and I've never made anything for more than like $400. So like the idea of making something for 15,000 was like I can't even process that. So I needed someone to help me just like break down the budget, and that's what Alex did. And then when we met, and this I think is also a learning moment for people who are listening to the podcast if you're interested in producing, is that it's very easy to become a PA. It's very easy to sometimes do these less glamorous producing jobs like line producing or whatever it may be. UPMing is in that same world. UPMing is unit production manager. They're basically in charge of just like the day-to-day like expenses on a set. So like they'll be getting food or if you need to get tape or whatever. But anyway, so I think it's a good learning lesson because I met with Alex and she would just wanted to be a line producer and I just needed someone to help me with the budget and the schedule. But then while we were talking, she kind of advocated for herself and kind of told me a little bit more about what she's doing. She told me about in the making. And I was like, oh wait, that's so cool. Like this person just pulled off this huge show. I want this person to help me with the film more in general.
I did not advocate for myself.
You totally did. You totally did though.
In your defense, that was, you know, that definitely, like, Emilio, I don't think would have considered it until you did advocate for yourself. And that's kind of a good lesson in general, is like, you know, find a way to humbly brag about yourself when it's possible, because it, you know, can ultimately land you a job and a super awesome opportunity.
Not to say that like producing.
I also just think that like creating a relationship with the people that you're working with is what she did, rather than like being like, I'm gonna advocate for myself, you know, like you know, there's just something about like getting to know the people that you're working with. Then you feel like you can actually talk about yourself and talk about the things that you're working on, and then in that way it's a humble brag, I guess, you know.
Yeah, and honestly, it's that was thing where I definitely needed help. I mean, Maggie was a huge help in pre-production on this film. She was also like there every day doing the nitty-gritty of planning and things, and like insurance is especially a hard time of my life. It was a very, very stressful time of my life because we were trying to figure out insurance. I'd be like, okay, great, this is the insurance we need. And then Alex would send me an email like, oh wait, JK, we need this insurance. And I'm like, that's like 3 times as expensive as what I was expecting, and you know, things like that. But we figured it out, and obviously nothing got broke or ruined. So that's awesome. So now we're at a stage with the ladder where Alex joined us as the editor. We finished editing it. Now we're coloring it and sound designing it and things like that. So you said the 5 stages of producing would be development, pre-production, production, post-production, and then marketing or distribution. So we're getting close to the distribution phase. So I was just curious if maybe you could talk about our approach in the ladder for festivals, and then also just like in general for anyone who maybe wants to be a producer, like what should they be thinking about when it comes to festivals or how to get it seen by the right people?
Right. So our approach for distribution is film festival. So we have been researching just the festivals that are broad, you know, like Sundance, Toronto, Telluride, things like that, and then really honing into Emilio as a filmmaker. And the fact that he is from like Seattle, maybe there's a Ketchikan Film Festival. Like, definitely check out all the film festivals that are in your hometown or any states that you're from. I also recommend a festival targeted towards your ethnicity or your race. There's a lot of that. Sometimes even your religion. There's a lot of Jewish film festivals for us Jewish gals and guys. And then there's no hurt. There's no hurt. That's not the right word. There's no
Harm.
Right. Thank you. There's no harm in applying to as many festivals as you can. Obviously, it does cost money. So if you are, for example, building a crowdfunding campaign for your film, you definitely want to take in distribution into account. What I did is I listed out there's still more to add, but most of the film festivals that Amelia wants to enter in, and then I would put in the late entry fee. You think you're going to be early, but sometimes you need extra time. You never know, but it's better to raise more money and come in under budget. And you just sort of want to tally that up and make sure you account for that in how much you're raising. If you're not raising money and you're paying out of pocket, I would maybe suggest starting with smaller film festivals that you think you have a better shot at getting into, because then you can put the little, I don't know what it's called, crown or the little symbol that you were in said film festival. Are you gonna say it?
It's called a laurel, but yes.
Okay. A laurel.
It's like the little leaves that's like this film festival.
Exactly. On like your poster or in a description when a film festival asks you, where has this been, screened or anything like that. The biggest thing is just to really look at every film festival's rules and regulations. There are a lot of, this could not have been screened at a US film already, or this could not have been screened at a different festival. This couldn't have been released publicly yet. So definitely look into the terms and conditions when it comes to applying. That's about it for distribution, but for festivals at least, but for Emilio's plan, definitely film festivals is the way to go.
Yeah. Well, I think we've in general have talked a lot about the topics that we wanted to touch into. I don't know if anyone on the pod has maybe some closing thoughts about producing, maybe what does producing mean in our new normal, maybe just things we realized while listening. Because I learned a lot just by listening to you, Alex. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I had no idea that there were two more steps to producing, the pre-production and the post-production. So that's super cool. And I think it's all well put. It's like, you're never really ever done with a movie. You might move on to a next project, but then maybe something gets traction again or gets into a festival, and then you kind of have to allocate resources to that. So I guess my kind of question in that is, if you're multitasking and on different films at once, how do you stay focused, and how are you able to stay organized? Because again, what you were saying is a big part of producing is organization.
Right. I think in that regard, if you're handling multiple projects at a time, have an assistant. I myself had an assistant for In the Making, actually, because it was a lot, and that was just for a pilot. But if you don't have an assistant, which is totally fine, it's really just keeping on top of it, and also communication. Communication is at fault for a lot of problems in productions, in just relationships in general. So just make sure that you're communicating with your team on a regular basis and checking in on them, seeing how else you can help. When it comes to organization, also having a calendar. Like I have a specific colored calendar for the ladder meetings and things like that. So just having those sorts of things bookmarked. But I would say, like, if there's one thing you need to take away is, again, it comes with the assertiveness, is communication.
Sorry for those watching the video version of the podcast. My mom just peeked through the window of my room. But no, thank you, Alex, for saying that. All right, we can.
With that, let's close. Yeah.
So we always end our podcast, Alex, with just talking about film, TV, video stuff that we've seen this past week that we liked. I'll go first, and then we'll go Maggie, Toby, and then end with you, Alex. All right. Okay. So my suggestion for this week, I just started watching it last week and I'm almost done with it, is Dave. It's a television series by FXX. It's on Hulu. I've heard a lot about it. but like I just never got around to it. When I was in high school, I was like a little Dickie stan, and then I grew up, and then I didn't, and then I didn't like really pay attention. But then, there's a lot of people involved with that show that I'm a big fan of. So like, I'll just watch it because I just wanted something dumb, and I literally have binged it all. It is so funny and so smart, and like Dave, like little Dicky as a person, like is this huge narcissist, but he's also so funny. And so like the show is about him, like it's like a semi-autobiographical show about his own life, but then in every episode he's like constantly cracking jokes about the fact that he's a narcissist. And so it's just really funny, it's really great, and definitely been my enjoyable watch of this past week. What about you, Maggie?
Well, I have to say that Emilio made me watch the YouTube video he was talking about last week. So I watched that. I did enjoy it. It was by the creator CJ the X, who made the Jeff Bezos Bo Burnham video. So definitely go check that out.
We now
Super
have two
interesting.
suggestions.
Yeah, and also I introduced Emilio to Legally Blonde over the weekend. So that was a fun experience. What about you, Toby?
Yeah, classic. I didn't do too much viewing. I will say that I did watch a cut of The Ladder, which when it is publicly released, I would definitely recommend seeing that. I think we just got picture lock, so it was nice to see everything, like kind of all of our work coming together on screen. It's funny because I personally don't like enjoy looking at my own work. Like I'm very critical of myself. But it's nice to see that, like, so much blood, sweat, and tears going into something has like a good result. And I think everyone on the team should be really proud of what they've done, and the strides and work to really make it such a strong and good story is great. And yeah, so when it is viewable, I'm sure Emilio will post it everywhere. So
Well,
people can check it out.
the easiest way to see it, if you're listening to podcast, is pretty soon here, probably this next week. We're going to be launching a second round of crowdfunding for the campaign to cover our last little bit of budget for the film that we needed because insurance costs money. And anyone who donates $15 or more to that gets a link to it as soon as it's completed. So if you want to see the film, that's going to be the easiest way to check it out.
There you
All right,
go.
Alex, what film, TV, video stuff have you watched this week that you are vibing with?
Sure. So I watched 2 films, and I'm currently obsessed with a TV show right now. But I watched Rebel Without a Cause by Nicholas Ray, which was really good. I love James Dean. I've come to realize I really love him. And then I watched Goodfellas by Martin Scorsese, which is so amazing. I love like the crime mobster genre. It's amazing. So I'm obsessed with Goodfellas. And then the TV show that I'm obsessed with right now is Manifest. It's been advertised so much on Netflix, but I had to start watching it. I'm so into like supernatural TV shows and stuff, and it's like it's actually too good. Like it's too good.
Maggie, do you want to
Yes.
explain why you're gasping?
Hate that show
Whoa!
so much.
Wow, the tea.
What?
It freaks me out. I
Not
hate
'cause of quality.
planes. No, I hate planes. I watched it when I was so young. I was in high school. And it freaked me out so much. I also live under where like planes literally fly over my building because I'm like 15 minutes from an airport, and every single time I hear a plane, I'm like, oh my god, it's gonna crash. It's the worst thing ever.
Really? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Supernatural, so I'm kind of into
My
it.
mom loves that show. That's why I
Yeah.
was gasping. No, I hate it. I've heard that it's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
All right. Well, I guess our listeners can watch Manifest and you can tell us if it's terrifying or if it's good, or maybe it's good because it's terrifying. All right, we'll just go around and tell you all how you can learn more about us, keep in contact with us. My name is Emilio Miguel Torres. Once again, I'm Emilio Films on pretty much every platform: TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. My website's emiliofilms.com. Reach out if you have any questions or you just want to see what I'm up to. Maggie, how can people find you?
I'm on Instagram at Warmly Maggie. That's it.
You can find me on TikTok at CineHacks. You can also reach out to me on Instagram at Toby Romero, that last O being a 0. And you can also email the podcast at got.it.pod@gmail.com. Alex, how can we find you?
Wow. Well, yeah, I go by Alex, but I also go by Alexa Hellman. Alexa, but with a Y in place of the E. And I don't use social media. I don't quite like it. But I am on YouTube. I sort of do film reviews. I'm getting back to it. So you can find me there at that name. And then also my letterbox, Alexa Helmet. You can find me there as well.
Damn, no one just plugged their letterbox.
Yeah,
before.
my
That's-
letterbox is
big,
Emilio
that's
Films
big.
too.
Heck.
Yeah, well, awesome.
Yeah,
If you
and
don't
what-
know what Letterbox is, that's a great film review app that you should definitely download. Amelia, what'd you have to say?
No, yeah, I was gonna say I'm also on Letterboxd, Emilio Films. Check out my thoughts on movies. They're pretty dumb. Also, just to end this podcast, just want to shout out Maggie. She just got cast in a new role at Arizona State University. Maggie, who are you portraying in what show?
I'm playing Kathy in the last 5 years. So about to
Woo.
get emotional up here.
So if you're in the
Start
Tempe
crying a lot.
area in October, look for posters. All right. Thank you all. See you all next week. Thanks for
you
listening.
again, Alex, for coming on this this
Yeah.
week. It's been super fun having you and really, really cool to talk producing.
So insightful.
All right.
Alright.
Thanks,
You're
y'all.
awesome.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.